Why did the gun stop? The question rippled across the field like smoke, curling into every soldier's lungs, forcing them to hold their breath. The battlefield, once a roaring metal storm of shells and fire, suddenly hushed. Even the air seemed afraid to move. And then a single step. One boot pressed into the broken earth, crunching glass, shifting stone. That sound, small, fragile, carried louder than artillery, louder than death itself. She had walked forward, alone. No orders barked, no radio crackled, no one told her to move. And yet every pair of eyes, friend and foe alike, lifted toward her. A figure in dust-stained fatigues, helmet tilted low, rifle slung against her side. Nothing about her was grand or dramatic, but the silence made her enormous. That silence wrapped around her like armor. They did not know her name, most still don't. But she had been here before, on ground that stank of rust and smoke, where silence was a trap and noise was a curse. To her, this moment wasn't strange. It was inevitable. What no one knew was that she wasn't walking forward for them. Not for victory, not for orders, not even for survival. She was walking forward for something she had carried alone for years, something deeper than pride, heavier than fear. But that story no one around her would hear yet, not now. 2 hours earlier, she had been invisible. The briefing room buzzed with restless energy. A dozen soldiers hunched over maps, coffee cooling in paper cups, radios spitting static. Men argued in circles about coordinates and cover fire. The commander scribbled lines across a map, words snapping sharp like glass. North Ridge, suppressive fire, possible ambush. She sat at the far end of the table, elbows tight to her ribs, silent, eyes tracing the map, memorizing terrain lines, escape routes, blind spots. No one asked her opinion. No one noticed the way she tapped her finger, soft, rhythmic, against her thigh. They had dismissed her presence the way one ignores a shadow in the corner. It wasn't new. She had learned long ago that silence was its own kind of weapon. Speak less, listen more. Let them underestimate you. Let them believe you had nothing to add. Because when the moment came, silence struck harder than noise. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. When the briefing ended, the men stood, chairs scraping back, boots clattering. She moved slower, almost reluctant. Her hand hovered above the folded paper tucked inside her pocket, a letter, unopened, weeks old. She had never gathered the courage to read it. On the truck ride out, the sky carried the bruised purple of a storm not yet born. Wind curled through cracks in the armored frame, carrying dust into her lungs. Around her, the others joked. One lit a cigarette, another played cards on his knee. The youngest hummed a tune beneath his breath, shaky but stubborn, as if clinging to normalcy. She kept her eyes forward. But she noticed. She always noticed. The way the older sergeant kept touching his ring finger, twisting the band around and around until the skin beneath turned raw. The way the medic rubbed his temple, fighting the headache of too many sleepless nights. The way the driver gripped the wheel too tightly, jaw clenched, as though he could steer them away from destiny itself. Everyone carried ghosts, some heavier than others. Her own ghost sat in the seat beside her, invisible but present. If she turned her head, she would swear she could still see him, his crooked grin, his careless laugh, the way his hand once rested warm against her wrist when words had failed. But he wasn't here. He hadn't been for years. The letter in her pocket was from his mother. She knew it even without reading. She had delayed opening it because she feared the weight of her own cowardice. The convoy jolted to a stop. Engines rattled, brakes screeched, and suddenly the air thickened. The commander barked orders. Troops spilled out, rifles raised, boots sinking into the cracked dirt. Across the ridge, enemy fire had begun its song, sharp bursts, echoing cracks, dust plumes rising. Chaos erupted. She moved like muscle memory, rifle against shoulder, breath held, eyes scanning. Each shot was deliberate, measured. Not the frantic spray of fear, but the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. She wasn't the fastest. She wasn't the loudest. but every bullet meant something. Still, doubt clawed at her ribs. What if they were right not to notice her? What if silence wasn't strength but weakness? A grenade rolled across the dirt, landing near the young soldier who had been humming earlier. His eyes froze wide, terror locking his body. Without thought, she dove. The blast swallowed the ground, flinging dust and metal. Pain licked across her shoulder, hot, searing, but he was alive. When she pushed herself up, coughing, she caught his eyes. He tried to speak. Couldn't. But the way he looked at her, like she was not invisible anymore, burned deeper than the shrapnel lodged in her arm. Night dragged in like a curtain, smothering the battlefield with cold darkness. The gunfire ebbed, then roared, then ebbed again. Somewhere in that chaos, command ordered a push across the open ground. A suicide run, some muttered. A necessity, others insisted. And that was when the silence fell. It wasn't victory. It wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes when two storms crash into each other and both lose their breath. The world seemed to wait. That was when she stepped forward. Her boot crunched the earth and every soldier froze. Eyes followed her. Hands trembled, weapons half lowered. Even the enemy hesitated, fingers tight on triggers but unwilling to fire first. She didn't glance back. She didn't look for approval. Inside, her chest ached with more than the shrapnel wound. It ached with the memory of the man who wasn't here, the letter she hadn't read, the silence she had worn for years. She knew they saw only a soldier walking into the open, but for her, every step was a conversation with him. Every breath was a vow to the dead. And though no one knew it yet, this moment would etch itself into every witness's memory, not because of strategy, not because of orders, but because sometimes a single step can echo louder than thunder. The first shot after the silence did not come from her rifle. It cracked across the night from the ridge, sparking chaos once more. Soldiers dove for cover. Orders shouted. Explosions bloomed. But she kept moving, one step then another, until dust and shadow swallowed her. Someone called her name too late. What came next, no one expected. Who followed her? The question surged in every soldier's mind, but no one dared move. Dust hung in the night like a curtain, trembling under distant artillery. Her silhouette was gone. One heartbeat she had been there, the next she was swallowed by shadow. Some muttered her name again, softer this time. Others cursed under their breath, fear sharpening their voices. The commander snapped orders: hold position, cover the flank, wait for signal, but his tone betrayed the crack in his certainty. She had acted outside the script, and sometimes the unscripted moments rewrote the story. No one saw her crawl low beneath the ridge, belly pressing into dirt, shoulders screaming with the weight of shrapnel. No one saw how deliberate her movements were, slow, careful, almost reverent, as though each shift of her body was a prayer to the ground itself. The truth was, she didn't know if she meant to survive, not this time. An hour before, she had pressed her back against a crumbling wall, watching muzzle flashes streak the horizon. A voice in her ear, static, broken, fed coordinates, warnings, fragments of strategy. But her mind wasn't on the radio. It was on the letter in her pocket. She had finally pulled it out. Torn edges, creased folds, smudges from fingers that had clutched it too many times without opening. For the first time since it arrived, she broke the seal. Inside, a mother's handwriting, shaky, tender, relentless in its honesty. It said things she wasn't ready to hear. That the boy she once loved, now a ghost stitched into her every breath, had believed in her more than anyone. That before his last mission, he had told his mother about her. Not about the soldier she became, but about the girl who used to sit with him on the edge of a dock, feet dangling over water, talking about futures that felt like fairy tales. The letter carried no accusation, only grace, a grace she had never given herself. She folded it once more, pressed it to her chest, then tucked it back. And when the guns quieted, when silence claimed the night, she understood. Her next step wasn't about orders. It wasn't about proving herself to men in briefing rooms who couldn't see her. It was about walking forward with the weight of that letter, forward into the place he never returned from. The ground ahead was a scarred no-man's land, littered with twisted metal, shattered helmets, broken rifles. A place where names faded but echoes remained. She crawled through it inch by inch, palms scraping, breath shallow. Through the dust she caught sight of two figures, enemy scouts, rifles slung loose, searching. Their voices floated toward her, foreign words softened by fatigue, heavy with the same weariness she knew too well. They were not demons, not monsters, just men who had been told to fight. Her finger brushed the trigger of her rifle. A twitch. That was all it would take, but something in their voices stalled her. A laughter, brief, hollow, but real, rose between them, the kind that soldiers used when the alternative was despair. She did not shoot, not yet. Instead, she shifted into deeper shadow, letting them pass. Each step forward wasn't just survival, it was choice, and with every choice her silence grew louder. Behind her, in the safety of cover, the others argued. She's gone rogue. She'll get herself killed. No, she's drawing their eyes. The young soldier, the one she had saved from the grenade, spoke for the first time that night. His voice cracked but carried weight. She knows something we don't. No one answered him, but in their silence doubt bloomed. The ridge loomed taller now. Smoke coiled up its edges, ghostly fingers against the moonlight. Somewhere beyond, heavy guns waited. She could almost feel them, massive, hidden, ready to awaken and tear apart everything in their path. That was the mission all along. Silence the ridge before it silenced them. But to her, the ridge was more than terrain. It was where he had fallen. The coordinates matched. The place he had never returned from. Her chest tightened, not with fear but with memory. She saw him again, grinning in the truck, shoulder bumping hers, teasing her about her silence. "One day," he had said, "you'll have to speak. Even silence has a breaking point." She had rolled her eyes then. She almost smiled now. Almost. A flare split the sky, bright red, tearing across the darkness. The battlefield lit for a heartbeat, and in that glow she saw them. Bodies sprawled along the slope, uniforms torn, faces half buried in dirt. Some were hers, some were theirs. Death made no distinction. She slowed, fingers brushing against a broken dog tag in the mud. She turned it over. The name was half scratched away, unreadable. Still, she tucked it into her pocket. A small act, a promise not to let someone vanish nameless. That was when she heard it. A child's cry. Soft, muffled, coming from deeper within the ridge. She froze, every instinct warred within her, trick, trap, imagination. But it came again. Fragile, desperate, unmistakable. Her heart hammered. This was not in the mission brief. This was not war. This was life, fragile and out of place. She pressed lower to the ground, inching toward the sound. Back at camp, the radio sparked. The commander barked for updates. None came. The silence stretched. Soldiers exchanged glances, waiting for the impossible, her voice. The medic muttered almost to himself. "If she doesn't come back," he stopped, couldn't finish. The young soldier whispered, "She'll come back," but his eyes betrayed doubt. The sound led her to a collapsed shelter carved into the ridge. Its roof had caved, but a narrow gap revealed movement inside. She pressed her ear close. The cry again, softer, fatting. A baby. Her throat tightened. She remembered something she hadn't allowed herself to recall in years. Her sister's child, newborn, skin warm against her arm the day she had last held her. Before she left home. Before she traded lullabies for gunfire. She bit her lip, steadying her breath. Then, with careful strength, she shifted stones, widening the gap. Dust poured out. Inside, she glimpsed a woman's body, still, unmoving, shielding the small bundle that whimpered beneath her. The woman was gone. The child was not. The weight of choice crushed her chest. She could leave it. She could pretend she never heard. But she couldn't, not anymore. She reached in, cradling the fragile life against her chest, wrapping it inside her jacket. The warmth seeped into her skin, a heartbeat against her ribs. And in that moment she understood something brutal. The mission had changed. Behind the ridge, enemy voices grew sharper. They had heard the flare, too. Boots scraped stone, rifles clicked. She had seconds, maybe less. She pressed her back against the dirt, cradling the child, rifle angled across her knees. Her mind spun, not with panic but with calculation. She could fight. She could hide. She could run. None of the options ended cleanly. For the first time in years, she whispered words aloud. To the child, to herself, to the night. "Not this time. You won't be left behind." The sound of her voice startled her. Rough, unused, but steady. And then she moved again, forward, not back. Always forward. Hours later, the soldiers at the ridge would swear they saw her emerge from the dust, jacket pulled tight, rifle slung, eyes unshaken. They would swear that the silence she carried felt different now, heavier, but also alive. But none of them would know what she carried inside that jacket. Not yet. Not until the end. What kind of soldier carries a child into battle? The question pressed against her ribs as fiercely as the small heartbeat she felt under her jacket. Every step she took now carried double weight, hers and his. The baby stirred, soft whimpers rising above the drone of distant artillery. Each sound felt dangerous. Each cry was a flare that could give her away. She moved low through the ruins, feet silent, eyes sharp. Her rifle hung heavier than before, balanced against the delicate warmth pressed to her chest. She had fought in storms of steel, walked fields where silence meant death. But this trembling bundle, terrified her more than bullets ever had. Because for once, it wasn't her life she risked. Behind her, the rest of the unit waited. None knew why she had disappeared into the dust. None guessed what she had found. They thought she was chasing strategy or vengeance or some reckless instinct. But if they had seen her now, crouching beneath crumbled walls with a child hidden against her, they might not have understood. Or maybe they would. Because every soldier carried something invisible. Memories, promises, regrets. Hers had taken form, fragile and breathing in the middle of war. The ridge above her rattled with enemy fire. Tracers streaked the night like angry comets. Voices shouted in languages she couldn't parse but tones she recognized. Fear, urgency, command. They didn't know she was beneath them, weaving through shadow. Not yet. The baby shifted again, a tiny fist pressing against her chest. She froze, breath caught. For a moment, she thought the child would cry loud enough to split the night. But then, mercifully, he quieted, nestling into the hollow beneath her chin. Her heart stuttered. She had forgotten what it felt like, to hold something fragile, to feel life that asked nothing from her but warmth. And it scared her, because she wasn't sure she deserved it. A memory broke through, sharp as shrapnel. Her sister's voice, years ago, "Promise me if anything ever happens, you'll be there for her, for the baby." She had promised, and then she left. Left her family, left her sister, left the baby she had never truly known. She had buried that guilt under missions and silence, telling herself there was no other way, that the uniform demanded more than home ever could. But now, here, in this wasteland, she felt the weight of that broken promise pressing back into her arms. The ground shook. A mortar thumped nearby, dust showering her hair, clinging to her lips. She pulled the baby tighter, rocking gently without thinking. Reflex, instinct, something older than training, something human. A voice barked close, enemy patrol. Shadows flickered across broken stone, boots crunching. She slid into deeper darkness, pressing her body into the dirt, making herself small. The baby whimpered. Her hand covered his tiny mouth, not rough but desperate. She whispered into his ear words without meaning but heavy with plea. "SHH, please, please." The patrol stopped. One of them lit a cigarette, the ember burning like an eye in the night. Smoke curled. They laughed softly, nervous laughter. She could almost imagine them as boys at a campfire, not men hunting death. One step closer, too close. Her finger brushed her trigger. Her breath slowed. If she fired, the sound would wake the ridge and every gun would turn toward her. If she stayed still, discovery was seconds away. The baby shifted again, a muffled cry. The soldier paused, head turning. She made her choice. Her body surged up from shadow, rifle butt slamming into his temple before he could raise alarm. He crumpled silently. She caught him, lowering his body slow to the dirt. The second soldier spun, rifle lifting. She fired once, the sound swallowed by thunder rolling across the horizon. Silence again, silence thick and trembling. The baby cried louder. She pressed him close, whispering, rocking, praying. Her hands shook, not from killing, not from fear of being seen, but from the unbearable weight of carrying innocence in a place designed only for ruin. Back at the convoy, the others waited restless. The commander cursed, checking his watch, radio maps. He was losing patience, losing control. The young soldier she had saved stared into the dust where she'd vanished. His lips moved with unspoken words. A prayer, maybe, or just her name. He didn't know why he trusted her. He only knew the way she had thrown herself over him when the grenade rolled close. That kind of act carved itself into a man's bones. The medic muttered, "She won't make it back." The young one shook his head, "She will." But deep down, even he feared she wouldn't. She reached the edge of the ridge. The child slept now, exhaustion pulling him into fragile dreams. She laid him gently in a hollow of stone, wrapping her jacket around him, shielding him from the cold night air. Her chest ached leaving him there, but she needed her hands free. She turned her eyes upward, toward the emplacement she knew waited. Massive guns, heavy fortifications, the very things that could slaughter her unit if they tried to cross. This was the mission. This was why they came. Her silence had brought her here step by step, but now she stood at a threshold. Duty demanded destruction. The baby demanded protection. Both required sacrifice, and she knew she couldn't carry both burdens forever. She climbed, fingers dug into rock, boots slipping, body screaming from the wound in her shoulder. Dust filled her mouth, blood wet her sleeve. Still she climbed. Higher, closer, until voices grew clear above her. Enemy gunners, 3 of them, tired, careless, but dangerous. Their silhouettes moved against the glow of their equipment, shadows etched in orange. She raised her rifle, breath slowing. 1 squeeze, 2, 3, she could end it quick. But then one of them spoke, and she froze. His voice cracked, shaky. He was telling a story about home, about a son small waiting for him. The others listened, nodding, their faces softened by something beyond war. She lowered her rifle an inch, just an inch. And in that moment, she hated the war more than ever. Because it asked her to kill men who sounded like fathers. Because it put bobbies under ridges and rifles in trembling hands. Because it demanded silence where there should have been voices. She swallowed hard, finger trembling. The choice sat heavy in her chest. Then the crack of a rifle, not hers. One of the men fell, blood spraying, body collapsing against the gun. The others shouted, diving for cover. Confusion erupted. Another shot rang. Another fell. She ducked low, stunned, realizing it wasn't her who had fired. It was her unit. They had advanced, breaking the silence she had carried. The ridge erupted into chaos. She grabbed her rifle again, firing into the confusion, covering her unit's push. Bullets whipped past, stone shattered, screams cut the night. She fought not like a ghost, but like a storm breaking free. Every shot was survival, every movement choice. And still, through it all, her mind clung to the hollow of stone where the child slept. She prayed the chaos wouldn't reach him. When the smoke settled, the ridge was theirs. Enemy guns silenced, bodies sprawled. Her unit climbed up, faces streaked with grime, eyes wide with exhaustion. The commander spotted her first, relief mixed with anger. "Where the hell did you?" Then he stopped. Because from behind her, faint, fragile, came the sound of a baby crying. Every soldier froze. The night swallowed the sound, amplifying it until it was all they heard. Her silence had broken, not with words, not with orders, but with life itself. Who would believe it? A baby's cry, drifting over a ridge still smoking with gunfire. The sound seemed impossible, like a mistake, like something the night had imagined. Soldiers who moments ago shouted orders and curses now stood frozen, their rifles slack in their hands. She turned slowly, dust streaking her face, jacket pulled open just enough to reveal the small bundle pressed against her chest. Tiny hands shifted, a face scrunched in confusion, a mouth opening wide to release another helpless cry. Silence deeper than any battlefield hush followed. Not even the commander spoke. The young soldier, the one she had saved, moved first. He stepped forward, eyes wide, voice breaking. "Is that?" He couldn't finish. She nodded once, no words. The commander finally found his voice, though it cracked under its own weight. "Where the hell did that come from?" His question was too sharp, too defensive, like a man trying to deny what was plain in front of him. She only shook her head. "Doesn't matter." Her voice was low, rough, but steady. It startled them. Most had never heard her speak more than a few clipped words. The medic approached next. His face, normally hard, softened. He reached out, hesitant, then pulled back as if afraid to touch. "He's alive." She looked down at the baby, who squirmed but clung to her jacket. Alive. A long beat passed. Then the commander swore under his breath, dragging a hand across his face. "This isn't our mission. We can't." He stopped, staring at the small fist that had curled around the edge of her sleeve. The silence that followed was worse than any firefight. They regrouped at the ridge's crest, enemy guns destroyed but nerves frayed. The battlefield below stretched in ruin, scattered bodies and smoking wrecks. Above them the stars felt too bright, too distant. The baby whimpered again, and every soldier's head turned. The commander knelt, elbows on his knees, voice heavy. "We're not equipped for this. We're cut off, low on supplies. We've got orders to push east by dawn. We can't carry a child through that." The young soldier bristled. "So we just leave him?" His voice cracked, but his jaw held firm. No one answered. The medic lit a cigarette, the ember trembling. "We've patched holes in bleeding men with less than we've got. A baby. He doesn't stand a chance out here. And if command finds out we risked lives to save him," he trailed off, shaking his head. The commander's gaze turned hard. "You know the rules. We can't afford attachments." She listened, silent, rocking the baby against her chest. Inside, a storm raged, guilt, anger, defiance. The letter in her pocket burned like fire. She had broken her sister's promise once. She would not break it again. Finally she spoke, "I'll carry him." Her voice was steady, stronger than before. The commander blinked, surprised by her interruption. She rarely spoke. When she did, it mattered. "You'll slow us down," he said flatly. "Then leave me behind," she replied. The words cut the air like a blade. The others shifted uncomfortably. No one dared support her openly, not yet. But the young soldier stared at her as though she had voiced what he couldn't. His hand twitched toward his rifle, not to use it, but to hold on to something solid. Finally the commander sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "Fine, for now. But when this puts us in the ground, it's on you." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The baby stirred, and she pulled him closer, as if shielding him from the commander's words. They moved out under a fractured moon. Boots heavy, bodies sore, hearts restless. The ridge fell behind them, but its ghosts followed. Every so often the baby fussed. Each sound was like a spark in the night. Every man flinched, imagining enemy ears catching it. But none told her to silence him. None dared. The medic eventually broke the tension, his voice low, almost conversational. "I had a daughter back home. She's 6 now. When she was born, I didn't even get to hold her. Shipped out 2 days later. Sometimes I forget the sound of her laugh." The young soldier swallowed hard. You'll see her again." The medic exhaled smoke. "Maybe." The words hung heavy, heavier than the pack on his shoulders. Hours bled into one another. Their pace slowed. The commander's eyes darted constantly to the horizon, calculating, measuring risk against time. When they stopped briefly in a half-collapsed farmhouse, exhaustion hit them all like bricks. Some slumped against walls. Others rubbed dirt into their eyes to stay awake. She sat in the corner, the baby cradled in her lap. Moonlight slipped through holes in the roof, painting stripes across her face. The child's tiny breaths rose and fell, steady, trusting. For the first time in years, she let her guard slip. A tear slid down her cheek, cutting a path through dust. She wiped it quickly, ashamed, as though anyone had noticed. But one had. The young soldier. He sat across the room, pretending to clean his rifle, but his eyes never left her. When their gazes finally met, he didn't speak. He only nodded once. Respect, solidarity, a quiet promise. Just before dawn, the commander gathered them. His voice was low, urgent. "Scouts report enemy patrols sweeping east. If we don't move fast, we're done. No delays." His eyes flicked to her, then to the baby. No words, but the meaning was clear. She rose, strapping her rifle, adjusting the sling so she could still hold the child close. Her movements were fluid, determined. The others watched in silence. And then they marched. By midday, the sun was merciless. Heat pressed down, drying sweat into salt, choking lungs with dust. The baby whimpered weakly, and she poured the last drops of her canteen onto a rag, pressing it to his lips. He drank, small and desperate. The young soldier noticed. He slowed his pace, passed her his own canteen without a word. Their eyes met briefly, gratitude on hers, stubborn defiance on his. The commander saw it. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. They reached a ravine by late afternoon. Narrow, jagged, offering cover. But the moment they descended, they knew something was wrong. "Too quiet." The medic muttered, "Ambush." A shot cracked. Stone exploded near their feet. Voices erupted above, enemy rifles raining fire from the ridge. Chaos again. They dove for cover, returning fire. Dust filled the ravine, screams echoing off stone. The commander barked orders, but the sound drowned under gunfire. She crouched low, baby shielded beneath her body, rifle firing upward with precise bursts. Each shot found its mark, her silence broken only by the recoil's rhythm. The young soldier slid beside her, covering her flank. His eyes were wild, but his hands steady. "We can't stay pinned," he shouted. She glanced at the child, then at the ridge above. Options raced through her mind, none clean, none safe. And then she saw it. A narrow path cutting up the side of the ravine, half hidden by rubble, dangerous, exposed, but it led higher to them. She shifted the baby into the sling across her chest, tightening the straps until he was bound close, safe against her. Then she rose. Bullets snapped past, stones splintered, men shouted, but her steps were steady. The young soldier grabbed her arm. "You'll never make it." She met his eyes, calm but fierce. "Then remember this." And she kept climbing. Every man watched her. Enemy fire tore the air, but she didn't stop. One step, then another. Her figure grew smaller against the ridge, dust swirling around her. The commander cursed, fury and awe mixed in his voice. "She's insane." But even he couldn't look away. Because once again, her silence was louder than every gun. The climb was madness. Jagged stone cut her palms, dust filled her throat, bullets screamed past like hornets. Every instinct told her to stay low, to crawl into shadow, to survive. But she climbed. One hand, one foot, one breath. The baby was bound against her chest, his warmth anchoring her more than gravity. She shielded him with her body, arms and shoulders taking the stone's brutal edges. His small breaths were steady, his tiny weight a reminder that surrender was not an option. Behind her, the ravine echoed with gunfire. Her brothers in arms fired upward, desperate to keep the enemy distracted. Each burst of rifle fire was a thread holding her alive. But she felt the truth. They weren't just covering her. They were following her. The young soldier saw it first, her silhouette against the burning sky, moving with impossible resolve. His gut twisted. She was risking everything alone, and he couldn't stomach it. He fired 2 quick bursts, then slung his rifle and started climbing after her. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" the commander roared. The young soldier didn't look back. "Where she's going." The commander cursed, but something in his chest faltered. He barked orders for the rest to hold fire and cover. Yet his own eyes followed the climb, heart pounding as though the stone was under his palms too. The higher she went, the worse the fire became. Stones shattered near her, grit cut into her skin, but she didn't flinch. Her silence screamed louder than pain. And then sudden luck or fate. She reached a ledge half-covered, a pocket of shadow carved into the rock. She crouched, shifting the sling to check the baby. He whimpered, eyes blinking against dust. She pressed her lips to his forehead, whispering without sound, a vow spoken in the language of breath and heartbeat. A shadow moved above. Enemy boots shuffled close to the edge. She froze. Her hand slid to her pistol, grip firm but calm. When the soldier leaned too far, searching the ravine, she fired once. He fell without a sound, body tumbling down into the dust. The baby startled but did not cry. She closed her eyes for one sharp breath, then opened them. The climb wasn't over. Below, the young soldier reached the same ledge. His chest heaved, his eyes wide at the body sprawled near her boots. He glanced at the baby, then at her. "You're insane," he whispered. She didn't answer. She only pointed upward. He nodded, jaw tight, and they climbed together. The ridge top was a furnace of smoke and gunpowder. Enemy rifles barked, shouts cutting across the sky. They didn't expect her, not here, not now, not carrying life instead of death. She rose from the edge like a phantom, rifle snapping to her shoulder. Her shots were clean, sharp, each one breaking a hole in the enemy's defense. The young soldier followed, his own fire covering her blind side. It wasn't just a fight, it was something else, something none of the men below had words for. They watched from the ravine as she moved, one hand on her rifle, the other always near the sling across her chest, shielding what she carried. She fought not as a soldier alone, but as something more: protector, anchor, defiance made flesh. The medic swore under his breath. She's not fighting for orders, she's fighting for him. The commander clenched his jaw. He wanted to deny it, to call it recklessness, stupidity. But his heart beat too fast, his breath too shallow. He couldn't look away. "Cover them," he barked. "Move." And for the first time, the men didn't move because of rank. They moved because of her. The ridge became chaos. Bullets tore the sky. Shouts became screams. But she pressed forward, each step deliberate, each shot precise. The young soldier stumbled once, nearly falling, but her hand shot out, grabbing his collar, hauling him back to his feet, all without loosening her hold on the child. Together they pushed higher. When the last enemy on the ridge saw her rise from the smoke, rifle steady, child pressed against her, his weapon faltered. Just for a second, but that second was enough. Her shot was final. The ridge fell silent. Only wind remained, carrying the scent of smoke and blood. She lowered her rifle, body trembling with exhaustion, but she did not sit. She checked the baby, fingers brushing his cheek, then lifted her eyes to the horizon. Below, her unit erupted up the ravine, voices ragged with adrenaline. They poured onto the ridge, rifles scanning, boots crunching over stone. But when they saw her standing there, dust-covered, blood-streaked, child against her chest, their noise died. The silence was heavier than victory. The young soldier dropped to one knee, not from injury but from sheer weight of what he'd witnessed. His rifle slid from his hands, his eyes, wide and unblinking, filled with something between fear and reverence. The medic staggered up behind him, shaking his head. I don't even know what to call that. The commander stood last, chest heaving, sweat streaking down his face. He stared at her for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low, grudging but not empty. You just changed the mission. They regrouped in the ridge's shadow, checking ammo, patching wounds, reloading. But the air was different. Something unspoken hung between them all. The young soldier leaned back against a rock, laughing once, breathless. You carried a baby through hellfire, and I thought you were silent because you had nothing to say. She looked at him, her face gave nothing, but her eyes softened just slightly. He caught it, and it steadied him more than any medic's hand. As night fell, they built a small fire in the lee of the rocks. Not for warmth, they all knew fires invited danger, but because the baby needed it. His breaths came easier in the glow. His tiny hands opened and closed as if reaching for something unseen. The medic crouched near, his rough hands gentler than the men had ever seen. He touched the child's foot lightly, almost afraid. My little girl used to kick like that, he murmured. The commander sat apart, staring into the flames. His face was carved with conflict. He had led men through battles, had ordered retreats and charges, had buried brothers, but never had he been forced to face something so human. He looked at her finally. You know what command will say if they find out? Court-martial, worse. She adjusted the sling, eyes fixed on the fire. Let them. The words struck the air like steel. The commander rubbed his face. He wanted to argue, to crush the defiance. But the firelight danced across her profile, dust, scars, silence, and something in him knew it would be useless. She wasn't defying him. She was defying war itself. And for the first time in years, he envied her. When the baby stirred, she rose, packing along the ridge's edge. The night wind tugged at her hair, carrying faint echoes of distant gunfire. She hummed, not a melody, not even sound. Just breath, steady and soft, rising and falling like the ocean. The young soldier watched, whispering to the medic, she's different now. Or maybe she's always been different. The medic exhaled smoke, eyes on the child's shifting hands. She's showing us what we forgot. Sleep came in fragments. The men dozed in turns, rifles on their laps, eyes flicking open at every sound. But she stayed awake. The baby in her arms never left her sight. She fed him what little they had, gave him water drop by drop, cradled him against her chest as though her heartbeat could replace his mother. When dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky in thin strokes of red and gold, she stood at the ridge's edge. Her silhouette cut against the light, still and unyielding. The commander joined her, silent at first. Together they watched the horizon, smoke rising far in the distance. Finally he spoke, "You know this changes everything, right?" She nodded once. He glanced at her, then at the child. His voice softened just slightly. "Then we'd better make sure it's worth it." The unit marched again at first light. But now every step felt different. Not because the path was safer, it was. Not because their mission was clearer, it was. But because they were no longer marching only for orders written in some far-off office. They were marching for him. And though none said it out loud, every man knew. Her silence had become their command. How long could they keep moving like this? The question hung in every man's mind, but no one dared voice it. The Ridge victory had bought them hours, not days. Their rations were crumbs, their canteens nearly dry, and their boots were breaking under the merciless terrain. Every step eastward scraped something out of them. Hope, energy, trust. But she kept walking. Her boots struck the dirt in quiet rhythm, the baby cradled against her chest. He stirred sometimes, small fists clenching, whimpers muffled into her shirt. She soothed him with touch alone, gentle fingers brushing his cheek, the steady rise and fall of her breath. She never broke stride, not once. The others followed, because stopping meant admitting weakness. And none of them could bear that. The commander pushed hard, his face stone, but inside he felt the cracks. He had led men through firefights, across borders, through blood-soaked streets. But this, carrying an infant through enemy country, every doctrine, every order screamed against it. Yet each time he looked at her, at the weight she carried with absolute silence, he felt something he couldn't name. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't obedience. It was conviction. And conviction was contagious. The young soldier was the first to stumble. His knees buckled on a slope of shale, his rifle clattering against the rocks. He cursed under his breath, slamming a fist into the dirt before hauling himself upright. The medic reached him, hand on his shoulder. "Sit, breathe." "No time." The young soldier's voice was raw. He glanced at her, still ahead, the child steady in her arms. His chest burned with shame. "She's carrying a baby, and I can't even carry myself." The medic's hand tightened. His own face, weathered and lined, softened. "She's not carrying him alone. None of us are, remember that." But the words felt hollow even as he spoke them, because deep down he knew it was her, all of it. They were shadows cast in the light she carried forward. That night they camped in a dried-out wadi, stones for pillows, hunger gnawing like rats at their insides. No fire. Too dangerous. Only starlight flickered above, cold and indifferent. She sat apart from the others, back against a boulder, baby nestled in her arms. His breaths were shallow, uneven. She tilted the canteen, letting drops fall against his lips, but there was barely enough to wet his tongue. The young soldier watched, his throat aching with thirst of his own. "He won't make it if we don't find water." Her eyes flicked to his, steady, unblinking, then back to the child. She didn't need words. The silence said it all. The commander turned away, staring into the darkness. His mind spun maps he didn't trust, supply routes long abandoned, villages burned to ash. Somewhere out there, water existed, but reaching it, that was another battle entirely. It was the medic who cracked first. He pulled something from his pack, hands shaking, a packet of dried fruit, his last. He crouched beside her, offering it without words. She looked at him, then at the packet. Slowly she shook her head. "It's for him," the medic whispered. His voice was rough, almost breaking. "Not you, him." Her hand brushed the child's hair. Then, with quiet deliberation, she took the packet, opened it, and pressed the soft pulp against the baby's lips. The child swallowed weakly, his breath easing. The medic sat back, burying his face in his hands. "My little girl," he murmured. "She used to love these before she—" His voice caught. He didn't finish. No one pressed him. But something shifted in the silence. For the first time, they weren't just following her. They were giving to her, piece by piece, sacrifice by sacrifice, as if the act of feeding that child fed something in them too. The next day, the enemy found them. It began with distant shouts, the crack of rifles. Dust kicked up in the valley below, men moving fast, too fast. "Scouts," the commander hissed. "We need height." They scrambled for the rocks, lungs burning. She didn't run. She climbed, deliberate, baby tight against her chest, her free hand gripping stone like it belonged to her. Bullets snapped past. One struck near her foot, sparking against rock. She didn't flinch. Her silence was heavier than fear. The young soldier turned, firing wildly, covering her ascent. "Go," he shouted. "Go, go, go." The commander's orders cut through the chaos. "Push east, don't stop." And so they ran, hours, maybe more. The sun blistered overhead, burning skin, blinding eyes. When at last they collapsed behind a ridge, hearts pounding like drums, they realized the enemy had fallen back. For now. But the cost was clear. Ammunition nearly gone, food gone, water nearly gone. And one more thing, hope. That night the commander called them together. His face was carved from shadow, eyes hard. "We can't keep this up, not like this, not with him." He nodded toward the child. The young soldier bristled. "You're not saying." "I'm saying we think. We're soldiers, not saviors. Every mile we carry him, we risk everything. Orders don't cover this. And when command finds out—" "Command isn't here," the medic snapped. His voice shook with anger, brittle and sharp. We are. Silence fell. Only the baby's faint breaths filled it. Her eyes stayed on the fireless dark, never shifting. Finally, she rose. She adjusted the sling, pressed the child closer, and walked to the edge of the wadi. She didn't speak. She didn't look back. But the message was clear. She wasn't leaving him. Not now, not ever. The others sat in stunned silence. Then one by one they stood too. The young soldier first, then the medic, finally the commander. No words, just footsteps joining hers. By dawn, their bodies were wrecked. Feet blistered, muscles screaming, minds hollow. But when they stumbled upon the trickle of a spring, hidden in the rocks like a secret, they nearly wept. The medic filled canteens, pressing water into the baby's mouth with careful hands. The child stirred, coughing, then drinking greedily. A sound escaped him, half whimper, half laugh, fragile, human, alive. The young soldier smiled for the first time in days. That's it, little man, that's it. Even the commander's face cracked, just slightly. But her eyes filled just for a second. She turned away so no one saw. That night, after they drank their fill and slept in the safety of the spring's rocks, the commander lay awake. His thoughts burned. He wanted to hate her, to call her reckless, dangerous, to say she was breaking him. But instead, he remembered the way she carried silence like a shield, the way her eyes never wavered, even under fire, the way she looked at the child like he was more than a burden, like he was a promise. And in the deepest corner of his heart, the commander felt something he hadn't in years. Faith. The journey didn't get easier, but it changed. When they marched now, it wasn't only exhaustion in their bones, it was purpose. The young soldier walked closer, sometimes offering to take her rifle. She let him rarely, but never the child. The medic watched over her shoulder, always ready with hands that had healed and broken too many lives. Even the commander, gruff and silent, began to scan the horizon not just for threats, but for paths gentler, safer for her. They didn't talk about it, but they all knew. The mission had become hers. And somehow they all belonged to it now. The village appeared at dusk. At first it was only shapes on the horizon, broken walls, crooked beams, stone piles that might once have been homes. The air around it was still, unnervingly still, as though sound itself avoided the ruins. They approached slow, rifles ready, hearts pounding. Even the baby seemed to sense the shift, his soft breaths uneven against her chest. No movement, no smoke, no voices, only wind threading through hollow windows. The commander raised a fist. They stopped at the edge of the village, staring at what remained of lives erased. "Clear it," he ordered quietly. The young soldier went first, slipping between crumbled doorframes, boots crunching on shattered pottery. The medic followed, eyes sharp, though his hands twitched as if he could feel the ghosts pressing around him. She didn't move until the silence deepened. Then she stepped forward, slow, deliberate, the child pressed tight against her. Every house they passed was the same. Roofs caved, walls scarred with black, toys scattered in the dust, untouched by years but worn by weather. The young soldier lifted a rusted tricycle, its wheels bent, paint stripped. He swallowed hard and set it down gently, as though returning it to a child who would never return. The medic knelt near a doorway, fingers brushing faint carvings in the stone. Names, dates. He bowed his head, lips moving soundlessly. And she walked through it all without breaking stride, silent, still, carrying the only piece of life among the dead. They gathered in what had once been the village square. A well stood at the center, its stones cracked but intact. The commander ordered a search. Minutes later, the medic shouted water, deep but clean enough. For the first time in days, they drank until their throats no longer burned. They refilled canteens, splashed faces, even let the baby's lips taste the cool drops. His small sigh was almost a laugh. Almost. The young soldier leaned back against the well, closing his eyes. Feels like heaven. But the medic shook his head. No, heaven doesn't smell like smoke. They fell into silence again, the weight of the village pressing down. That night they lit a small fire in the square. Risky, but the ruins shielded them, and their bodies screamed for warmth. The flames danced across broken walls, shadows stretching like the long fingers of the past. The young soldier stared into them, jaw tight. Finally, words spilled out. "My brother had a place like this. A farm, chickens, goats, you name it. We used to sleep under the stars. Then the war," his voice cracked. He turned away, pressing a hand to his face. The medic's voice followed, low and ragged. "My daughter, she would have been 8 now. She had this laugh loud enough to make the neighbors complain. I thought I'd see her again. I thought—" He stopped. The firelight caught the wetness in his eyes. The commander sat stiff, saying nothing. His silence wasn't strength, it was armor. Armor cracking with every word he refused to speak. And her, she didn't offer stories. She didn't add to the fire of grief. She only sat, child in her arms, gaze locked on the flames. Her silence spoke louder than their words. It said, "I know loss, more than you'll ever understand." They didn't ask, they didn't need to. Later, when the others dozed, the commander found her standing at the edge of the square. The moonlight painted her profile in silver, the baby's face pressed into her chest. He stepped closer, his boots crunching softly. "You've seen this before." She didn't turn. His voice was quieter now, stripped of command. "Villages, burned, erased. This isn't new to you, is it?" Still, she didn't speak. But her hand, resting on the baby's back, trembled just once. And that was his answer. The next morning they searched the ruins. Not for survivors, they knew better, but for supplies, anything that could stretch their march. The young soldier returned with a tin of beans, dented but sealed. The medic found cloth rags, but clean enough to bind wounds. The commander uncovered a crate of ammunition buried beneath debris, though most rounds were corroded. And she found a cradle. It lay in a corner of a collapsed house, half covered by ash. She brushed the soot away, revealing carved wood, chipped but still strong. For a moment she stood frozen, eyes locked on it. Then she turned, walked out, and didn't look back. The cradle remained empty. By midday the enemy was near again. Tracks in the dirt, fresh, too fresh. The commander cursed under his breath. "They're hunting us, won't stop." The medic's jaw clenched, "So we move faster." "No," the commander snapped. "We move smarter, we use this place." He pointed to the ruins. "We turn it into a wall, make them pay for every step." The young soldier's face twisted. "And if they don't stop coming?" The commander didn't answer. But she shifted the baby higher on her chest, stepped past them, and laid her rifle against the well. Her eyes met the commander's, calm and steady. She wasn't waiting, she wasn't debating, she was ready. And in that silence, the men found their own answer. The fight came at dusk. Shadows poured from the hills, figures moving fast, rifles flashing. The ruins erupted with gunfire. Bullets snapped through broken beams, ricocheted off stone, kicked up dust in choking clouds. The commander barked orders, voice cutting through chaos. The young soldier fired until his rifle jammed, then switched to pistol. The medic dragged one of them back after a round caught his arm, binding the wound with cloth torn from the ruins. And her. She moved like a ghost between the shadows. Rifle up, eyes unblinking, every shot deliberate. She never wasted a bullet, never faltered. Even when the baby stirred, she shifted him close, soothing with one hand while firing with the other. It wasn't just skill, it was something beyond it, something the enemy couldn't fight. They came with rage, with numbers, with hunger. She met them with silence, and silence held. When the dusk cleared, the ruins stood still again. The enemy retreated, leaving bodies behind. The square smelled of gunpowder and blood. The young soldier collapsed against the well, chest heaving. "We're still alive." His laugh was shaky, more relief than joy. The medic tied off his bandage, grimacing. "Barely." The commander surveyed the field, jaw set. Victory was hollow. This was no battle, just a delay. More would come. But when his gaze found her standing at the edge of the ruins, baby steady against her chest, rifle at her side, he felt something shift inside him. Her silence wasn't hollow, it was full, full of meaning, full of defiance, full of something the war couldn't erase. He didn't understand it yet, but he knew without her they'd already be dead. That night the fire burned low in the square. The ruins seemed less empty, less silent, not because life had returned, but because her silence had filled it. The young soldier whispered, voice trembling, "We can't leave him behind, no matter what command says, no matter what happens to us." The medic nodded slowly, hand pressed to his wound. "He's more than a child now. He's the reason." The commander said nothing, but his eyes, fixed on her silhouette against the firelight, betrayed what his words refused. He was no longer leading them. She was, and she hadn't spoken a single word. Her hand trembled slightly, though no one could see it in the dark. The night had grown cold, and the wind carried with it the scent of burned fuel and broken soil. She stood on the ridge, her boots sinking slightly into the loose earth. Below her stretched the ruins of a place that once breathed with life. Now only silence lived there. Silence and memory. Why was she still standing? Why had she survived when so many hadn't? Her breath caught in her chest, and she pressed her palm against the fabric of her shirt just above her heart. It wasn't fear that shook her now. It wasn't exhaustion. It was the weight of what she had carried and what she still had to leave behind. The battlefield had fallen quiet hours ago. No gunfire, no orders, no signals, only the echo of her own step, louder than any thunderous barrage that had ever roared across the valley. That single step, the one she had taken forward when retreat would have been easier, when surrender would have been safer. She thought of his voice, her brother, the last words he'd said before the convoy disappeared into smoke. "Don't wait for me, just make it mean something." She hadn't answered him then. Her throat had locked, but every choice since that moment had been her answer. A soft sound drifted behind her, boots crunching gravel. She didn't turn, she already knew who it was. "You're not going back with us, are you?" The voice was low, tired. Sergeant Hale. His silhouette lingered a few steps back, hesitant, as if afraid to break the fragile stillness around her. She closed her eyes, let the night seep in. "I wasn't meant to leave with anyone, not anymore." He didn't argue, he only exhaled, a sigh that seemed to carry years of fatigue. Then he stepped closer, his voice softer. "The men, they'll remember you, not because of orders, not because of medals, but because you stood when it should have been impossible. They'll carry that." She let the words sit. She didn't believe in glory. She didn't believe in being remembered. She believed in choices. One after another, each carving its mark, each shaping the silence she carried. The horizon flickered with distant lightning, too far to hear. Her eyes followed it, the flash of pale light against endless black. It reminded her of the beacon she once searched for as a child when storms rattled the windows of her home. Back then, she had thought light always meant safety. Now she knew light could also mean exposure, risk, sacrifice. Her lips moved before she realized she was speaking. "Do you think they'll ever understand why we stayed, why we kept going when there was nothing left to hold on to?" Hale's answer came after a long pause. "Maybe not, but maybe that's not the point." The simplicity of it struck her. She turned her head slightly, catching his outline against the broken skyline. A man who had seen too much, lost too much, and yet still managed to place truth into words stripped of pretense. She nodded once, slowly, then faced forward again. The silence deepened, pressing close, yet it wasn't suffocating. It was a silence filled with stories, theirs, the fallen's, the unknown's. A silence that demanded endurance, not noise. Her boots shifted, one final step forward. The ground crumbled slightly beneath her, gravel slipping down the slope. She didn't waver. Her balance held. She thought of her mother's hands, worn from work, gentle even when tired. She thought of laughter once shared in kitchens, in sunlight, long before the world had drawn her into its storms. She thought of every small reason that had made her strong enough to carry weight most couldn't see. And then she let go of thought. She let herself be part of the stillness. Behind her, Hale whispered something she barely caught, as though speaking to himself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The words lingered in the air, more enduring than gunfire, more permanent than victory. She lowered her head, her eyes closing as the wind wrapped around her like an unseen cloak. She didn't need to answer. She didn't need to explain. The battlefield had spoken its last word. Now it was her silence that remained. And in that silence, her step would echo forever.